You stand at the day's last edge the way a shepherd stands at a gate, one hand on wood, the other feeling for the bar. The yard has the dull shine of trampled earth, and the house keeps its breath. Cob walls hold the warmth like a slow-baked loaf. They have done their quiet holding all year, and will not boast about it now. Somewhere a hen gives the soft mutter that means she has finally chosen surrender over argument. Good. There is enough talk in the world without poultry adding to it. You lift the shutter, and it answers in its own small dialect, a hush and a rub. The grain long since polished by hands that did this before you, and will do it after you. The iron ring taps the granite sill, a little bell that rings only for the household. The latch tongue slides home with a patient sound, and the draft, surprised to be dismissed, curls back on itself and sulks away along the lane. Your fingers smell faintly of smoke and cider, the honest perfumes of a place that minds its means. You can trace in the air the path you have walked since morning, to the stack for kindling, to the well where the bucket kissed the lip, to the herb patch where rue and thyme still pretend they are taller than the geese. The day sits down beside you like a field hand at last meal, not hungry, not proud, simply there to share the bench until the bowl is empty. Across the yard, the byre offers a low complaint as the cattle settle, as if every rib deserves a say. From the thatch above, a late swallow scribbles once, and then thinks better of it. Smoke thins at the ridge, and takes the color of bruised plum. The lane beyond the hedge loosens into evening. Cart ruts hold a shallow sheen where last night's drizzle made up its mind. Someone far off coughs the way a chimney coughs, and the sound drifts through hazel like seed fluff. You check the second shutter, then the third. This one has a stubbornness, like a cousin's temper. You lift, then press the edge into the house's shoulder, and it accepts the hint. The bar seats, the wedge nods, everything in its place, no flourish, no drama. The small square of oiled parchment in the frame takes the last light and gives it back as a kind, dull glow. You could read the first strokes of a prayer by that glow, if you were minded to pray before the bread is cut. Inside, the hearth holds a hill of embers, red as rowan berries and just as sure. You spread them with the flat of the rake until they make a soft country of heat. A blackened pot leans where it always leans. Even pots learn habits under the same roof. You nudge a stick of apple wood into the quiet, and it answers with a timid crackle, more apology than announcement. The smell opens like a cupboard, where autumn has been stored carefully, slice by slice. The bench under the window is smooth from backs and elbows. You sit, not because sitting is required, but because it fits the evening the way a lid fits a jar. The cat discovers this at once, and installs itself where your knee makes a shelf. Its purr is not ambitious, merely a little mill wheel turning in easy water. You rub the place between the ears that promises good behavior later, when the house would prefer silence to chase. Out beyond the latch, the hedges practice their night shapes. Gorse and hawthorn draw themselves closer, as if sharing a jest you are not owed. You pretend offense and accept your place, a tenant of this field of sounds, not master. Salt rides the air from the distant gray water. It finds your lips and reminds you that the world is larger than your chores. Somewhere a boy is being told to bring the bucket back, and somewhere he is pretending not to hear. That is the way of boys and buckets in any season. The parish bell does its careful count, each stroke a bead rolled along a chord. It is never in a rush. Even haste and iron must obey the air between notes. You listen as one listens to rain on seedbeds, not for news, only for the company of a measured thing. After the last stroke, the wind tests the tower and decides against argument. You look to the door latch again, not because you doubt it, but because habit is the cousin of rest. Your palm finds the smoothness worn there by others. Mother, father, the nameless hands before them who taught the wood to know the shape of human worry. The beam sits true across the hooks. The wedges are wedged. The seam between plank and jamb holds like a vow. If weather wishes to preach through the crack, it will have to settle for a whisper. At the hearth, you coax the rushlight. The reed stub has seen better days. Most of us have. You trim the tallow's thin lip with your thumbnail and set the wick at a considerate angle. The flame rises with a small opinion about everything. It prefers stillness. It dislikes pride. It will do its duty and no more. You offer it your gratitude anyway, for you have learned that thanks costs less than oil and buys more patience. From the loft, the small ones breathe in even measures. You do not count, but your ear notes the pattern and is satisfied. A mouse makes a plan behind the grain bin and then thinks better of it. Good sense is catching. You remind yourself, not for the first time, that this house keeps two ledgers, one for things, one for sounds. The second is the truer book, and tonight you intend to read it carefully, page by page, until the letters turn to soft mist. Dusk sits down fully, like a quiet neighbor bringing a bowl to share. You have made your rounds, shutters drawn, latch set, embers settled, small comforts counted. The lane exhales against the hedge sighs against the eaves murmur to the rafters in the plain language of wood. You answer by doing nothing at all. In that fine conversation, you are the best sort of partner, listening more than speaking and letting the night find its chair. You stand at the day's last edge with one palm on wood and one eye on the lane. Cob walls keep their warmth like a loaf cooling under a cloth. They do not boast, but they hold. You draw the first shutter. It answers in a friendly scrape, the iron ring knocking the sill once like a neighbor who knows the house and will not take offense if kept waiting. The bar settles. The draft that loved to stroll through your room accepts exile and goes to tease the hedge instead. Around you, the yard finishes its small chores. A hen mutters agreement with sleep. The byre sighs as cattle choose the soft side of standing. From the ridge, smoke thins into plum dusk and forgets its business. You check the second shutter, which likes to pretend stubbornness. It yields after a patient lift and a press, as all stubborn things do when you refuse to argue with them. Your fingers smell of hearth and cider, honest perfumes of a house that minds its means. You could read your whole day in that scent. The bucket's cold lip at the well, the herb patch where time puts on importance, the wood pile that pretends it never shrank. You sit a moment on the bench by the small square of oiled parchment. Light floats there like cream, soft and unhurried. You could trace the first line of a prayer if you wished, but the night does not ask for words. It asks for listening. You rake the embers into a red hill that makes no speeches and needs no applause. The cat arrives to occupy your knee as if it had paid rent. Its purr turns like a mill wheel in easy water. Beyond the door, hedges gather their night shapes, hawthorn tucking in its thorns as if counting them. Salt comes faint from the far gray water and sits on your lip to remind you the world is larger than your yard. The parish bell rolls its careful beads across the air. You do not count. The ear does it for you and is satisfied. After the last note loosens, everything waits a respectful heartbeat, and then the crickets pick up the stitching where the bell left off. You touch the latch again, not from fear, only from the pleasure of a habit well kept. Wood remembers every palm that has taught it patience. Tonight your hand adds its small lesson and feels the lesson answer back. Hearing grows when sight agrees to rest. You lean your shoulder to the jamb and let the lane come to you. A cart far off chooses a gentler rattle. A boy's laugh tumbles into a hush. The eaves settle with the old bones of timber. And then the edge of what you came for pricks the dark around, measured who, careful as a cooper, rolling along the thatch lines. You do not smile, not quite. You only let the sound take a chair near the fire like any quiet guest who knows your house. The hearth has its own firm astronomy, and you tend its constellations with a rake. Coals glow like patient stars that ask for nothing except a measured breath of air. You spread them flat and lay a stick of applewood so the embers will remember their manners. The first small crackle is modest, the kind of speech you welcome indoors. Pots rest where pots prefer to rest tilted. Familiar, convinced the hook was made to their shape. Heat lingers in the stones the way a story lingers in an old mouth. You warm your palms, and then the side of your cheek, accepting the day's last coin of comfort. Above you, the smoke hole lets out a thin ribbon that writes no letters, just a steady line of agreement with the sky. You listen to the draft's whisper, as if it were an elder who repeats himself, not to be challenged, only to be heard until he is finished. On the settle, the cat unspools to maximum length and pretends to be a bolster. It offers one eye to negotiations and then closes it again, satisfied that you will not misuse the evening. Somewhere under the loft ladder, a mouse begins a speech and abandons it at the first creak of your boot leather. Good judgment becomes contagious after sundown. Your ear stays balanced between inside and out, a gait that swings easy both ways. The lane gives back the smallest scrape of a pebble, then the hush that follows when a neighbor decides he is finished with the bucket for the night. A slow who passes over the thatch, then another, spaced like stitches on a careful hem. You could mark the pauses with pins, if hands were not already full of warmth. The embers, content, settle into their red geography. You nudge them just enough to keep the hill from falling asleep too soon. The iron sighs, once the same way it has sighed since the day it arrived, and then grows thoughtful. Through the window square, the pale sliver of moon rises to the eaves and pauses, as if listening at your latch before choosing the next roof. You let the hearth speak its last soft words. Every sound inside is put in order, so the sounds outside can be received without confusion. In that tidy quiet, the owl's call rounds itself again, full and unhurried, as if the night were a bowl and the voice a ladle drawing from it. You nod, the agreement of one keeper to another. You will mind the coals, it will mind the fields. You pour a cup of rough cider, the kind that puts small order into a mouth gone dry from chores. It smells of autumn's good stubbornness, orchard fog, bruised sweetness, the clean bite that persuades you to leave worry for the morning. The wooden cup fits your hand like inheritance. No silver flourishes, nothing to teach the lips vanity, only a plain rim that knows what it is for. You sit with your back to the warm stones and let the drink smooth the edges of thought. Outside, the lane well remembers its puddles, but they remember you less. That is the proper way of lanes and puddles. The cider goes evenly, not too loud, not too shy. It informs the body that the day can be folded and put away. The tongue agrees and signs the paper quietly. From the loft, a small contented turn of straw reports that sleep is negotiating with youth. You approve the terms without comment. Your ear, newly polished by cider, hears farther and softer at once. The wind comes from the salt, then from the hedge, changing languages without pride. Somewhere, a plank remembers a long-ago boot and creaks as if to keep from forgetting itself entirely. There again the round call. Nearer this time, the measured who that travels like a bead slid along a cord. You count the spaces between, because the spaces are the part that tell you if the bird is at ease or attending business. This one is untroubled. It repeats without hurry, as if practicing for a choir that needs no audience. The barn owl keeps its counsel differently, a long thread of sound like silk pulled from a reel. You do not expect it yet. Threads arrive when they please. You take another mouthful and listen for the lane's answer. The hedge keeps its own small court. Robin, vole, leaf, all making their cases in proper order. You let them finish. The cup cools your palm. Heat from the hearth warms the other. Between those two comforts, you find the size of the evening exactly right. When the cider is done, you set the cup upside down so the cat will not borrow wisdom from its last drops. Your hand returns to the latch just for ceremony. The wood greets you like a friend whose stories you already know and still enjoy. Somewhere beyond, the owl calls once more, and the house, hearing it with you, grows even quieter, as if to be better company for the sound. Buckwheat waits in its bowl, gray as early fog, smelling faintly of nut and field. You whisk enough water to make a batter thin as a country sermon, nothing fancy, nothing that will keep anyone standing too long. The griddle remembers every supper that ever sat on it, and takes the heat with dignified calm. A smear of fat hisses the way a secret hisses when it does not wish to be told. You pour a circle, then tilt your wrist. The batter runs obediently and decides to be a galette. Steam lifts in a humble veil. You slide the flat blade under and turn with the same rhythm you use for raking hay, only now there is less to complain about. The room fills with a warm, nutty promise. You break a corner to test and burn your tongue slightly. The tongue forgives quickly when buckwheat is involved. A little cheese, a scrap of onion, nothing that would make a steward write it down, and yet it is exactly what evening asked for. You fold the circle into a soft quarter and listen while it cools. On the other side of the door, the air tastes of leaf and tide. The first owl calls again, not much closer, not farther, simply correct, as if measuring your patience and finding it acceptable. You eat without ceremony, eyes on the hearth's red geography. The cat, who believes buckwheat is a form of praise for cats, wins a crumb through the usual methods and pretends astonishment at its own good fortune. The griddle's hissing declines into friendly silence. You wipe it with a twist of cloth and set it to rest against the brick like a soldier allowed to sleep on guard because no one with sense is marching tonight. From the lane comes the soft drag of someone's cloak and the grainy sound of shoes that chose prudence over polish. The voice you expect does not arrive. Instead, only the briefest exchange, "Good night," "Good night," and then the hedge mends the gap with leaves. In the repaired quiet, another call answers the first, but from a different quarter. Now the field has 2 lanterns hung in the dark, and no trouble between them. The Rushlight is a small, thrifty moon, and you tend it with the care given to small economies. You pinch the tallow's lip between nail and thumb until the flame agrees to stand steady. The reed wick bends like a barley stem after wind, and then remembers itself. Light pools on the table in a shallow dish, enough to find the knife, not enough to make anyone posture. You scrape the iron stand with a knife tip to free yesterday's drips. They come away like thin wax leaves. The flame answers with a bright opinion, and then settles. In its mild circle, everything loses urgency. The spoon with a nick like a crescent, the bowl that keeps a crack as if it were a pet, the cloth that has been a cloth for longer than anyone can prove. You move these small planets into a better order, and the room accepts the correction with gratitude. At the door, you lift the latch a finger's width to taste the night. Damp, yes, a little sea, a little dung, a touch of bruised nettle where someone forgot to be careful. No rain yet. The flue breathes along with you, the house's second chest. You lower the latch again and lay the beam across with the confidence of a person who has closed this door every evening of a life. From the eaves comes a quick shuffle, then stillness, the language of feather on timber. The barn owl's thread unwinds at last, a long, pale cry that is more cloth than word. It draws itself through the dark like linen being pulled smooth on a table. You do not go out after it. You stand where you are and let the sound enter by itself, like a guest who knows his place at your board. Between calls, the village refills its cushion of hush. A dog breathes a warning to no one in particular. A man coughs once to prove he is alive and then, evidently convinced, quiets. Your Rushlight, pleased to be important, burns a little taller and then remembers thrift. You trim the wick a touch and blow on the flame, as you might blow on the cheek of a child who pretends to sleep. The latch lifts under your hand with the soft weight of custom. You open just far enough to let the night put a finger on your brow. Wind comes from the hedges tonight, parceling out scents, leaf mold like old bread, damp straw, a nudge of crushed apple from the press beam. You stand a moment between house and yard, 1 foot on beaten earth, 1 on the cool grass that still keeps a memory of noon. Hazel and hawthorn hold their counsel. Bocage does not hurry to reveal its crossings after dark. It prefers you to earn your map by listening. The first owl calls from the thatch line, as if counting the chimney pots. Across the lane, the answer comes from a low ash, tidy as a reply offered to a respectful elder. You could draw both voices with charcoal on the night, and not be far wrong. You step to the apple press and rest your forearms on the beam. Old wood makes old remarks, all of them moderate. The beam knows weather better than any calendar, and tells you, in its squeak and ease, that tomorrow will be fit for turning soil, and not much else. A mouse hurries across the sill, decides against ambition, and vanishes into a pocket of shadow where ambition has no use. The calls come again, now keeping time with your own slow breath. You count the spaces, the way a hedge weaver counts gaps, 1 to let the light through, 1 to keep the stock at home. The barn owl drifts somewhere nearer the byre, its cloth cry low and certain. You do not see it. You see nothing but the shape the dark gives you, the lane's pale ribbon, the eaves' clean edge, the sky's thin blessing of stars. Satisfied, you lower the latch and set the beam once more. The house takes you back without asking questions, which is the best welcome a house can offer. You return to the hearth, lay another small stick to keep the red country awake, and listen as the field settles to its study, and the owls continue their steady schooling of the night. You step into the lane's narrow lungs, where hedges breathe the damp and return it sweeter. Hazel lifts a slow hand to your sleeve. Hawthorn keeps its thorns polite, as if remembering you have mended it in spring. Dew gathers on spiders' ladders, each rung a small bead that prefers to be moon rather than water. Somewhere beyond the bocage, the sea turns in its sleep and sends a pinch of salt to sit on your lip and make you truthful. The ground is a quilt of sounds even before anyone speaks. Bare earth gives a soft hush. A drift of straw crackles like a paper promise. The puddle at the gate makes the tiniest kiss under your boot, and then pretends innocence. You stop between two hedge corners and listen with your head tilted the way a thatcher studies a ridge. An owl regulates the dark again, who. And then the space, the exact measured space that shows the bird, is not in dispute with anything tonight. You make a map without chalk. Here the ash that keeps a memory of lightning. There the ashlar wall that leaks its warmth by degrees. A smaller voice then, questioning, tries a call from the orchard's low bough, and your ear notes it as you would note a new calf, promising, a little uncertain, not to be teased. Somewhere a beetle chooses the longer route and drags a leaf rib across a stone as if writing a letter to the soil. The hedges hold company you do not meet by name. Vole, toad, robin, weasel each makes its case in a whispering court, and the court sits all night without judgment. You accept the terms. You will pass quietly, and they will forget you at once. The lane bends into itself and offers another pocket of stillness where a call can collect and be understood. You wait there, hands open, as if the air might drop a coin into them. The call comes fuller, nearer the thatch run. It moves along the roof spines like a bead along a cord, steady as a cooper's hand. You do not answer with your own voice. Owls do not require your counsel, but you let the sound register in the ledger you keep behind the ear. Wind shifts. The hedge lists its leaves toward the byre, and the scent of crushed apple escapes the pressboards to say plainly that the world will be kind enough for sleeping. You turn back, owning nothing but the quiet you carried out, and a little more besides. The parish bell lifts itself by habit, not haste, and counts what is left of the day. 1, then the decent pause. 2, and the air nods as though it has been introduced. 3, 4. The notes round as loaves and just as moderate. You do not look for the tower. The ear has better walls and windows than stone can raise. Each stroke finds the lane, brushes the hedge tops, touches the thatch, and goes on to visit the meadow, where cattle practice the polite art of chewing. Curfew is not a command so much as a suggestion made by iron. The village accepts mostly. A door mutters its beam into place. A last pail's ring babbles at a well and is hushed. Two voices trade a good night in tones that ask nothing of tomorrow. Between the bell strokes, the owls measure their own affairs, who fitting themselves into the breathing of the place as snugly as a spoon into its notch. You let the counting wash past until the last note stands alone like a lantern set on a wall, surprised to be the only light left. Then even that thins and is gone, and you are left with a quiet that remembers it once had shape. Your shoulder finds the apple press beam again. Its grain creaks once to say that age is a form of knowledge and not an illness. The bell will lift at matins before you lift yourself. No need to bargain with it now. In the leftover hush, a barn owl unspools a silk-long cry across the byre roof. The sound pulls every little hair on the ear awake and then smooths them back into order. A dog considers the fact of owls and decides to be wise. You breathe, and the breath matches the distance between calls. And this, too, is a kind of counting that leaves no chalk mark and spoils nothing. The cat patrols the hearth like a minor lord inspecting a border, tail held in a thoughtful question. It finds the brick warm to fairness and circles until the circle fits. One paw claims the place nearest the ash door. The other three take their ease where heat strays through the slab. The purr that follows is not for your benefit, though you are permitted to overhear it. You stroke once along the spine, and the tail approves in a gesture that could be mistaken for dismissal. A moth arrives and writes its moth script against the rushlight, dot, dash, dash, dot, all of it in the steady language of impatience. The cat opens one eye to register the case and decides the moth is beneath its office. Good cats are like good magistrates. They save their energy for matters that tilt the balance of a room. The mouse that was thinking of a career behind the barley sack thinks instead of the priest's sermon and falls into virtue. Outside, the owls mind the ledger with finer ink than any steward uses. A round call rides the thatch line. A thinner answer comes from the orchard ladder. You place them by ear the way the cat places them by whisker. The hearth clicks as iron cools. The cat replies with a click of its own teeth in a dream that accuses no one. You add a stick no thicker than a finger, for company, not for heat, and the flame accepts it with a small amen. If anyone asked who rules this house at night, you would have to name the cat, the rushlight, and the owls in that order, with yourself as a respectful tenant. The arrangement suits everyone. You are allowed a knee for the cat, a chair for the light, and a window crack for the world. Through that thin seam, the call comes again, steady as a shuttle passing through the loom of the dark, weaving the room to the field so neatly that you cannot tell where either begins. People in your lane keep sayings the way they keep spoons, simple, serviceable, and shaped by use. About owls, the sayings multiply like beans when the year is kind. An owl calling near the byre, weather will be mild enough for mending harness. An owl silent for 3 nights together, plant the peas when the ground answers to your heel. You repeat none of it as law, but you let the phrases sit on the shelf of the mind where useful jars live. There are less polite scraps too, the sort that claim an owl may borrow a soul's coat and walk like a man by moonlight. You set those aside as you set aside a cracked cup, not to be trusted for hot broth, perhaps fit to hold nails. If a child asks, you give the gentler sayings, the ones that teach patience. Listen first, judge later, count the spaces, not the noise. Let the night finish its thought before you add yours. You inventory the rest with a dry humor that keeps superstition from swelling too large. Owls do not care what you name them. They have their own books, their own courts, their own quiet. Tonight they are not messengers, not omens, not cloaked folk seeking mischief. They are simply the village's soft watchmen, making their rounds with feathers instead of boots. You stand your own watch with them, and the bargain is clean. They keep the hedges, you keep the hearth. Somewhere outside, as if to underline your sober mood, a barn owl pulls that long linen note across the yard. If there is any message in it, it is only this: the fields are in order, and the mice are answering their summons. You let that wisdom be the last word, and find that the room has grown calmer, just by hearing it said without ornament. You decide your ears deserve tidy shelves, so you build them out of names that feel honest in the mouth. The round barrel-stave call that lands and breathes, then lands again. Who? Space. Who belongs to a craftsperson, so you name it the cooper. The long, cloth-smooth cry that glides from one end of the yard to the other without putting down its feet, you call that the linen. And the small, bright prickle from the hedge, the testing chirr that asks a question, and then pretends it never did. You keep that as the needle. Names are not cages, they are cupboards. When a thing has a cupboard, you are less tempted to drop it on the floor. You try your cupboards on the night, and find they fit. The cooper works the ridge, steady as a hand feeling along roof pegs to be certain each sits true. The linen travels the byre line, a pale thought passing through a room. You could almost feel it on your cheek if you were foolish enough to step out to meet it. The needle pricks at the orchard ladder and then behaves, because hedges prefer modesty after sundown. Your mouth says nothing, but the mind nods, pleased to have a place to set each sound where it won't roll away. Children learn better from these plain tools than from any Latin. You have tried both, and found the night forgets Latin quickly. The rushlight nods in agreement, its wick bent like a barley stem after weather. The cat approves in the manner of cats by doing nothing at all, and making that nothing look official. You listen again. Cooper space cooper. Linen. A quiet line you can trace without seeing. Needle absent, which is sometimes the politest thing a needle can be. You do not pretend science. The priest may keep his calendar, the steward his tallies, the miller his measure. Your ledger is the ear's little book, and you keep it clean with these 3 names and no more. If someone asked what good this does, you would only lift a shoulder and say that a settled ear settles the rest of you. You have noticed that when the ear knows where to put things, hands stop searching for tools that are already in their place. Breath finds a tempo without being told. Shoulders lower as if given leave. Even the floorboard that likes to voice opinions accepts the truce and holds its tongue. Outside, the cooper rounds off another call and lets the pause be as long as it needs, which is exactly long enough. The linen passes once, then folds itself into dark beyond the paddock. It will be back when there is work to file. You think of how people in the lane gather sayings the way they gather spoons, and you smile at the thought that your 3 small names are the only sayings you require tonight. No omen, no cloak and dagger gossip, no talk of souls on wing. Only good craft, a cooper at his staves, a cloth drawn true, a needle that knows when to rest. The room answers this ordering with its own mild tidiness. Spoon to spoon's notch, cup upside down, cloth folded so the old stain lies like a memory and not a boast. In that modest arrangement, the knight becomes a house guest who wipes his boots before crossing your threshold. You are not master of this. You are a decent host. You keep the chair warm, keep the fire honest, and keep the small cupboards of the ear ready to receive whatever the hedges decide to send. That is all, and it turns out to be plenty. The threshold is a little school for patience, and you enroll without complaint. 1 foot stays on the wide plank that knows every heel in the house. 1 foot explores the grass that keeps noon's heat as a rumor, and not a possession. You open the door only a hand's width, the language of respect, so the night may put its cool palm on your brow and see if you are fevered with the day. Through that slender grammar, the world speaks softly and is understood. Moon is shaved thin, which is the shape most useful for listening. Fat moons are generous with light and stingy with silence. Thin moons behave. They slip behind a cloud and return without theater, like a friend who remembers it is your house. Hedges breathe leaf and earth. The press beam gives off its stored apple, a faint promise that labor has a kind outcome. A far pail rings itself once at the parish well, and is content to be quiet thereafter. Each sound comes with its own space folded neatly after it, like a letter properly sealed. You do not go hunting for voices. You stand where the sill polishes the back of your calf, and let voices find you. First the cooper, rounding along the thatch, in the measured way of a man who has done the same job every evening of his life. Then after the pause that belongs to the world, not to you the linen drifts, low and even, the sound of a seam pulled smooth with 2 calm hands. The needle perhaps in the orchard, but the hedge keeps its secrets tonight, and you have no quarrel with that. Between calls, your breath learns humility. In no grabbing, out no sighing. It fits the spaces the way a good peg fits a hole. Firm, quiet, true. A moth writes its impatient script around the rushlight and smudges nothing. The flue mutters in hedgewind rather than sea wind. You translate without keeping score. Somewhere a boy laughs, realizes the lane is listening, and lets the laugh soften into a grin you can hear but not see. The door, pleased with your manners, does not creak. The beam rests across its iron, with the look of work done once and done right. You stay in that place long enough to redraw the room in your head with sound instead of lines. Here the dovecote's extra dark. There the apple press's low patience. Here the seam of stars the hedge allows at the gap by the ash. When you ease the latch down and bring the door to, the quiet does not stay outside like a dog told to sit. It steps in on its own, familiar as bread, and takes a chair near the hearth without asking for the best spot. You carry nothing in your hands, and still you have brought home more than you left with. The apple press beam is an elder who speaks seldom and is worth hearing when he does. You lean your forearms along his back and feel how patience has weight. Wood remembers rain better than clay, and remembers sunshine better than men. It keeps both inside its grain without opening its mouth, unless leaned on. You lean, and the beam creaks once. A syllable that means tomorrow will be proper for soil and decent for tempers. Beneath, crushed sweetness sleeps in the joints. Autumn's breath caught and folded. Pressed shadow is a cup the night drinks from. Sound collects there clearer than an open yard. The cooper measures his round across the ridge who, space, who like a good craftsman checking hoops with the same quiet tap each time. The linen crosses low above the byre. A pale glide you choose not to see, because seeing is greedy tonight, and listening is enough. Once, faint and prim, the needle tries a question from the orchard ladder, then tucks itself back as if remembering grown folk are speaking. Small industrious lives go about their bookkeeping near your boots. A beetle pulls a rib of leaf, as though hauling a beam for a doll's house. A toad rearranges himself by inches, and is satisfied with the new plan. A spider removes a dew bead from its thread, and stows it as if saving a tiny coin for need. Your ears share the room with these quiet clerks and are improved by such company. The press beam bears your weight without argument and smells a little richer for it, as if you had paid him in apple and smoke. You do not count minutes. Numbers belong to the steward's ledger and sour when brought into evenings like this. You count the pauses instead, because pauses are what the night writes in small, useful blanks that let thoughts lie down without bruising one another. When the cooper rests, your chest rests. When the linen draws, your ribs lengthen. When everything holds, you allow your jaw to loosen and your teeth to be neighbors instead of soldiers. The beam notices this, though he will not say so. If a neighbor came out now and asked, as neighbors will, "What do you hear?" you would not point with your hand. You would tip your chin, and he would understand. There along the ridge, there over the yard, there at the first rung. Enough said. The dark does not care for speeches. It prefers nods. You add one more nod to the night's polite exchange and feel the press's old strength pass into your shoulders in the form of calm. Wood teaches better than books when it chooses to teach at all. The dovecote throws a neat square of shadow that gathers every quiet within arm's reach. Above, the pigeons have withdrawn their faces into their own softness, master artisans of roundness, each a gray loaf perfectly proofed. Their little feet grip the ledges with the firmness of a promise. Below, the soil keeps the last of the sun as a pocket keeps a lost coin forgotten, until the hand is surprised by warmth. You take that warmth with your boots, and let it remind you that evening is generous in small ways, when asked for nothing larger. This corner makes echoes the way a good bowl makes soup taste better. Sounds return to you with a soft edge. A doorbeam settling 2 houses over. A respectful cough from the lane that refuses to become conversation. The rub of rough cloth at a sleeve as someone decides the night is reasonable and goes back inside. Owls prefer such corners. They drop their news here to be read cleanly. The cooper rounds his call along the roofbacks, even-tempered as ever. The linen draws a single breath of sound from the byre to the paddock and lays it down like thread on a loom. Tonight the needle has opinions twice it pricks from the orchard, quick and neat, then decides it has made its point and falls into good behavior. You listen with your mouth shut and your shoulders square to the dovecote wall, and find that your spine is happier being a post than a question mark. Counting notes is a mistake. Counting spaces works. Space tells you there is no quarrel in the field. Space says mice are busy and owls are employed, and hedges hold their shape. Even the hedgehog by the mitten keeps parliamentary decorum, lifting each foot with ceremony and setting it down as if writing his name. You smile at his hours. You have kept such ledgers yourself, and you approve his diligence. A moth lands on your sleeve, puts down its powder, and rises again as if to bless your attendance. Somewhere above, a pigeon dreams of grain and makes the smallest murmur, a sound so round it feels like a pebble in the palm. This too returns from the dovecote wall with a kind echo and persuades the ear that it has not wasted its time tonight. When at last you leave the shadow, you carry its orderly hush with you without noticing, the way a coat keeps warmth after the fire is out. Beyond the bocage there is a lane of stars that threads the village together by permission rather than command. You do not see the lane by its stones. You see it by the places where hedges allow the sky to pass. Here, between ash and hawthorn, a thin seam. There, above the ashlar wall, a square notched like a mason's mark. Farther on, a low window of darkness where sheep sleep. The fence line drawn with patience by someone who knew what patience was for. You have walked these gaps by daylight with a billhook and a basket. At night you walk them by ear. The cooper steps his call down that star lane, as if measuring timber with twine. Each round note drops into the open places and sits there shining without light. Far across the flax patch, softened by distance and good manners, another cooper answers from the meadow. The voice of a cousin you hear only at harvest and always like. Their speech is unhurried. It minds its punctuation. Between them, the crickets do the stitching that keeps a village from fraying. Quick, even, without pride. Your eyes rest where they are useful, and close where they are in the way. You let the dark draw the lines, and you learn the picture by trusting the hand that draws. Straw roofs become a low shore, stone walls, a steady tide, hedges, the long wave that never breaks and never needs to. You are fond of clouds that wear the moon thin, because they teach you to listen harder. When a cloud passes, you do not reward it with a look. You reward the ear for holding steady. There is a pleasure in knowing a map this way that chalk cannot give. Chalk remembers the hand too much. Sound remembers the world. Your ledger gains 3 sure entries: the ridge above your own door, the field edge beyond the flax, the turn by the trough where notes fatten for a heartbeat. You owe nothing for these. The night gives them as freely as breath. When at last you turn back toward the latch, your feet find the ruts without surprise, because the ear has already walked ahead and laid its path. Behind you, the 2 round voices continue their civil exchange. A wind from the salt makes the thatch drink deeper, and the echo sit closer to the roof. The field accepts the change as a field accepts weather, by continuing to be field. You too accept. You tuck the star lane into your pocket beside the apple scent, and the dovecote's soft echo, and carry all 3 in with you as if they were small tools useful tomorrow, but not required to be named again tonight. You stand at the lane's small rise, where the thatch shows its spine to a thin, considerate moon. The first round call rolls along the roof backs, like a hoop guided over straw, steady, patient, sure of its circle. Straw lends patience. Stone lends echo. Tonight the roofs prefer patience. So the note travels, rests, travels, rests, as if a careful hand felt each ridge pin in the dark and nodded at the answer it already knew. The lane narrows into plain usefulness. Hedge to the left, hedge to the right, a pale ribbon between. You do not move. You let the call come as bread steam. Comes to the nose, nothing snatched, nothing forced. Ash and apple hang in the air from the hearth and press beam. Damp grass climbs out of the cart ruts, as if the ground drew a cool breath after work. In the puddle by the gate, the moon keeps house for an instant, wobbles at your step, and forgives you like an old friend who has forgotten why he ever minded. Over the baker's low roof, where warmth loiters and mice invent stories they cannot finish, the answer arrives round, moderate, fit for company. Between those voices lies the kind of space households hope for. You keep that space in your ribs, leaving a thumb's breadth after each breath the way a sensible hand leaves space under a sealed jar. A cloud fattens the sound. A clearing thins it, neither asks you to choose sides. Above the thatch, smoke-hole comfort climbs, decides it has said enough, and with good manners says nothing more. You picture barrels in an honest row, staves true, hoops snug. The village feels like that. Grain in one, apples in another, water in a third, careful quiet in the rest. The cooper on the ridge keeps his measured round. A cow turns from the thought of lying down into lying down. A cat curls on the warmest brick and forgets grammar. You lay a palm on the gatepost worn smooth by other palms, and the wood lends you its steadiness learned from weather. Another who walks the ridge. You walk nothing. In the loft, a child shifts and sinks deeper into straw. You answer that report by doing nothing, which is the correct reply. Farther off, a faint cousin of a voice tries the measure and rests, content that the pattern holds. Even the flue keeps good grammar, sea wind hums, hedge wind mutters, and both behave like children in a parish hall. Brief, distinct, easy to forget when finished. You could stand all night and never meet an enemy. Lane, hedge, roof, sky, no quarrel among them. Even mouse and owl hold an old, tidy contract rather than a riot. If meaning lives here, it keeps a simple bed. This house has its watch. That field has its clerk. You, older than worry and younger than patience, are where you must be. When the set of calls pauses, the silence after is not a cliff, but a bench. You sit without sitting, and rest without closing your eyes. Cloud borrows the moon and returns it without apology. Together you and the quiet look at the roofs, like kin home from the road, who find nothing worth correcting. So you keep watch by doing less and less, until less becomes the work itself. Breath finds its shelf, thoughts put down their bundles, hands remember they are empty and become light for remembering. The owl on the ridge draws one last round circle and sets it lightly in the rafters for dawn to find. The baker's roof approves with a small plank sigh and becomes simply roof again. If a prayer is needed, the roofs have already said it by holding. If a promise is wanted, The hedges have already signed by staying. You stand, and the standing is enough. The barn owl's thread slips through the yard, a long, pale word that refuses to break into syllables. It glides along the byre eaves, crosses the paddock, and lifts as cloth drawn true across a table and taken up clean. You do not chase it with your eyes. Seeing would be greedy. Listening keeps you honest. For a breath, the place hears only itself. Straw answering straw, pin answering beam, rafters dividing weight with old arithmetic. Then the thread again, a little farther, exact as a chalk line snapped by a patient hand. Somewhere beyond the hedge, hunger is tended with competence. Order is being kept. No alarm is requested from you. The cooper rounds one solid note in reply, not a contest. Only proof that two crafts may share a night. Between their labors, the ledger fills with tidy marks that no steward will ever see. A distant dog raises a thought and sets it down again without shame. A cow turns the idea of lying down into lying down, the soft thump of a decision that hurts no one. The thread softens to a nearness, like a name you stop asking to perform, and you are glad to let it rest. You shift your weight and feel the ground forgive you. The press beam behind you drinks in your back like an elder willing to share a bench. His old creak translates as, tomorrow will be decent for soil, better for tempers. Above the byre, the long word slides once more, a smooth stroke that forgets pride. You learn not to wait for it and not to fear its going. Its business is neither praise nor omen. Its business is mice, and the keeping of a field in the kind of order that needs no proclamation. You stand in that order as if it were a cloak that fits. The lane is a narrow sleeve, the hedge its seam, the roofs its hood, the moon a sensible button that clasps without show. Nothing pulls, nothing pinches, nothing brags. A moth debates your sleeve and chooses the rushlight instead, where it writes impatient script and corrects none of it. Your breath matches the longer spaces between the cooper's rounds. You give the turns of your chest to those spaces, and they accept the gift, as if breath were coin needed to hire sleep. The byre settles. The yard has no new advice. The pale word withdraws beyond the paddock. The round word holds the ridge, and the small words of crickets mend what day frayed. You neither praise nor judge. You agree. That is enough agreement for one night. Counting the spaces becomes the evening's true work. Notes are pegs. The cord between sets the line. Who rest, who rest. Your breath fits those small rooms like a stool beneath a table. You measure without numbers 3 heartbeats, perhaps 4, between the cooper's rounds. A longer drift for the linen, as if that thread must cross a wider board. Nothing warns you. Everything invites you. Sleep should come carefully, tended, and not chased. When thought tries to sharpen itself, you hand it a tiny task. Match breath to space, space to breath. Pleased with employment, it forgets to trouble you. The lane narrows to what is useful. Wall, hedge, roof, gate. All the rest becomes a kind blank that carries sound without spilling it. The eaves drop once and grow modest. A beetle drags a leaf rib like a cart and proves that industry can be small and still be industry. The flue remembers sea. Winds hum and hedge. Winds mutter but declines to make a speech. You keep the count and then forget even to keep it. What remains is evenness itself, like water that has learned how to be level. Your jaw loosens. The tongue rests behind the teeth, as if it had never bargained. Shoulders lower of their own accord, like servants allowed to sit when the dishes are done. The pauses lengthen, perhaps the ridge worker moved to a lower roof, perhaps the linen thread unrolled over a farther paddock. Perhaps nothing changed at all, and your listening simply found a wider chair. You stay where you are and do less. Breath, pause, breath, pause. The village accepts your choice to be furniture. It leans no weight upon you that you cannot bear. It asks no wit, no oath, no silver. It asks for the decency to leave enough space between calls that the night can finish its sentences. You do your part by keeping quiet in the right places. The ledger of the dark shows no quarrel line. The tally of the ear shows no debt. The measure holds. You belong to it without owning it, and it belongs to you without asking your name. You map the hedgerow corners by ear alone, letting the night draw while you keep your hands politely still. You stand where your feet will not smudge the lines the air is making. The bend by the ashlar wall declares itself with a soft return, a friendly echo that rounds the cooper's call and hands it back. The narrow gap by the thorn shows in the thinning, where the note slides through and grows small, as if a careful clerk folded it twice and slipped it into a petty box. The trough corner, low and generous, fattens a voice for a heartbeat and then lets it go. You tip your head and the draft makes its neat sketch. You do not reach for chalk, because chalk remembers the hand and sound remembers the world. Press beam to your left, dovecote just behind, cartwright a calm inch off your heel. You recite these without speaking and store them on the shelf behind the ear where useful jars belong. The cooper owns the long side and keeps his rounds like a man keeps faith notes that neither brag nor beg, pauses of decent size that give neighbors room to breathe. The linen travels the short, unrolling from byre to paddock, a pale phrase written with a steady hand and lifted clean when finished. Somewhere near nettle the needle pricks once, blushes at its own boldness, and hides in leaf again. Your map admits the pinprick and refuses to be bothered. You borrow patience from timber. The apple press has plenty and shares it without comment. Its old scent rises, sweet and rough, and the beam gives one small opinion when your weight shifts, an elder's creak that means, go on, I have the rest. Your breath finds the intervals and sits down in them. Who space who, and your chest lowers. Linen space linen, and the ribs widen as if proud without vanity. Between those longer lines, the tiny measures of moth and drip sew the hem that keeps everything from fraying. You let the hem be long. You have no wish for the night to come undone. Daylight maps occur to you, and you decline them. Day named these places by duty hedgebank, ash stump, trough stone. Night names them by behavior. The ashlar bend is generosity. It returns what it is given, but rounder and kinder. The thorn gap is thrift. It sends most of the note on without a fuss. The trough corner is hospitality that does not boast. It fattens a voice and returns to modest work. You sign the ledger with your silence and become a parishioner in a church with no walls, where the sermon is made of breath and the creed is a rhythm you need not recite to know. Nothing here begs for a lantern. Your eyes rest like tools cleaned and hung. Your ears work like tools in hand, sharp by use and dulled by no chatter. If a cloud veils the thin moon, lines step nearer. If it clears, they step back. Either way, the drawing remains true. You count the trough as 1, the ashlar bend as 2, the thorn gap as 3, the orchard ladder's shadow as 4, and then you stop counting, because counting suggests ownership, and you are a guest. You hold yourself with the courtesy of a guest who wipes his boots and touches nothing he does not need. You inventory obedience. Hedge to hedge, roof to beam, beam to post, post to ground, ground to water and root. The ear learns those rules by being quiet in the proper places. A mouse declares a plan and revises it when linen passes. Revision is a kind of prayer the dark allows gladly. The cat, somewhere near the door, resists the old temptation to become law. That restraint draws a neat border on your map, a thin line prettier for being rarely used. The rushlight keeps to its small moon, because thrift is its nature and its pride. Mist reaches over the ruts and decides to be a low wall. Your skin reads it as chalkwood, a cool caution that tells you where not to place a foot if you mean to stay dry. Dew beads the cobbles and imagines itself stars. You accept the lie kindly, because it harms no one and helps the dark think well of itself. In the dovecote shadow, a pigeon sighs a warm crumb of sound, and the echo returns it baked. That square of dark becomes a font on your plan, a place where voices are baptized into clarity before being sent along. Your lane keeps a saying about owls that they count mice as stewards count rents and frown at waste. You leave stewards to their books and grant the birds an office of their own, not tallies, but keeping. Keeping hedges tidy of heedless scatter, keeping the night at its ordinary work, and the field at its modest order. Keeping your thoughts from rummaging in boxes that can stay locked until morning. Your map, obedient to their office, shows no roads to worry and no fields marked regret. It is corners and edges and neighbors, all arranged by listening and left unspoiled by pride. When you shift a foot, you do it as a weaver moves a shuttle enough to advance, not enough to blur. The drawing holds. The ashlar bend receives the next round note. and makes it wholesome. The thorn gap answers by reducing pride. The trough offers its one fattening and returns to plain duty. You could walk blind from post to post and find each latch by the first reach, but you do not walk. Walking would smudge what the ear made clean, and the night has paid for tidiness with quiet. You are not about to spend that coin. Standing turns into rest. Your back softens into the press beam's patient curve. The jaw forgets invention. The breath that used to race your chores moves as slowly as a parish list read by a kind voice that mispronounces nothing. The map, finished enough for peace, asks for no frame, only to be folded and set in the cupboard of the ear. There it will wait without complaint until dawn opens it, lays it under your feet, and makes a path of it while your mind, relieved of managing, is allowed to be merely here. Now, a neighbor coughs, and a dog reconsiders silence, and these two small things stitch the village cloth tighter instead of tearing it. The cough makes one dry fold, and is done. Like a page turned by a conscientious reader who refuses to lick a finger. The dog raises a thought, finds it heavy, and sets it down without shame, as a good porter sets down a load when the journey is over. A door settles into its beam with a woody amen, and a boot scuffs once at a threshold and remembers rest. None of this interrupts the night. All of it decorates it. After the cough, the cooper's round sits clearer in the air, pewter rubbed with a sleeve until the dull shine pleases even a modest eye. After the abandoned growl, the linen proves itself a line and not a shout, a long word spoken by someone who does not need to lean on anyone's shoulder to be heard. You stand where you are and do no more than breathe. Even breath is ornament enough when it is even. The yard shifts a little weight and then is content, the way a chair accepts a sitter and then forgets the name. You are tempted to praise the quiet aloud, and then you remember that praise, too, is a kind of noise when offered at the wrong hour. So you give the house a courtesy it understands. You move carefully. You put tools where tools belong. You thank the latch by touching it lightly and asking nothing from it. The rushlight burns at the size it prefers. The embers sink into a red country that governs by consent. You keep your office by doing less and less until the ledger shows only a line of agreement. You think of the day's talk, how words hurried and stumbled and tried to purchase each other, and you have a soft laugh compared to that market. Here speech has stopped buying and begun keeping. The owls keep the hedges, the house keeps the hush, the field keeps the animals, and the animals keep their warm, practical promises to breathe and to lie down and to get up when the light is reasonable. Another small cough. Not the same neighbor, not the same chest. This one is closer to a laugh. A throat forgetting itself for a blink before remembering the hour and the hedge. You let it pass into the dovecote shadow and come back rounder and kinder than it went out. The echo is a village craft too. Walls and corners do their part, shaping noises so people do not need to. You name the sounds as you would label jars on a shelf, so you do not reach for salt and find ash. Cough, door, boot, dog, thread, round, drip, moth. These labels are neat labels, not loud ones. They do not claim the room. They let a person walk past and choose without upsetting the shelf. In the pause between one round call and the next, you take a slow inventory of what is not happening. No gate claps in alarm. No horse stampedes. No child cries. No timber breaks. No rain begins. No quarrel rises. No pan hisses. No order is shouted. Absence is the kindest presence this hour can give. You remember how winter sometimes crowds the ears with hard talk rafters cracking, ice answering with spite, wind lifting its skirt and showing everyone too much. Tonight is not winter. It is a temperate cousin of sleep. The hedges breathe leaf and earth. The lane gives back a polite gloss where puddles have kept their mirrors. The moon, shaved thin, pretends not to be proud of how well it serves listening. And if pride remains, it is the sort that keeps its hat on indoors. Still, you do not trust quiet that has not been examined. You test it as a cooper tests a joint by tapping and listening for the tone. You lift the latch a finger's width and let the night put a cool thumb on your brow. Wind tonight is hedge wind, not sea wind. The flu's grammar is mutter, not hum. Your ear places these details in their cupboards and closes the doors without slamming. The cough that began this lesson has already taught it. You understand that small human noises do not compete with owls. They serve them. They clear the air of worry. They polish the space between calls until each round note fits like a coin in a well-kept slot. Even the dog's abandoned thought has value because it proves that good judgment can arrive late and still be good. So you award the dog a silent ribbon, and you award the cough a gentle nod, and you award yourself the right to go on listening without commentary. Inside the house, the red country lowers its hills. You bank the embers soft, give them a small stick for company, and feel the iron answer with a satisfied breath. The rushlight leans, remembers thrift, and straightens. The cup stands upside down so the cat will not borrow wisdom from the last drops. You are slow with each motion, because slowness is how a person says thank you when words would bruise. Out in the lane, the round voice and the long thread continue their careful bureaucracy. A note is stamped here, a line is filed there, a blank is left where a blank belongs. In that clerking, the village trusts its sleep. You trust yours too, without hurrying it. Soon the ledger will contain only the even weight of breath. Before you sit, you stand one more moment just to be sure the cloth lies flat. You give your attention to the smallest stitch, the breath, at the end of the breath. The no sound that keeps the fabric from puckering. It is there. You are satisfied. You put away the lesson with a tenderness that would embarrass it if it could watch. All is well. Cloud bank smothers, then clears the moon, and the village changes size without moving. When the cloth is drawn, hedge and eave lean closer as if to hear you. When the cloth is lifted, distance returns with dignity, and the lane stretches to its proper length. The calls do not change their minds. The cooper keeps his pace. The linen keeps its length. Only your ear adjusts its window smaller, larger, smaller, and then it settles in a good middle, satisfied that it has practiced both kinds of seeing without using its eyes. With the light reduced, nearer things step forward and bow. The moth writes dry script around the rushlight, impatient but harmless. A last drip at the eaves lets go with the decorum of a bead from a careful ladle. The cat makes a single, thoughtful thump as it edits its throne, and then goes still. A small emperor convinced that the empire can wait. Boards breathe their wooden breath, and the flue chooses mutter instead of hum. Sea wind having agreed to sleep elsewhere this hour. With moon back, farther things resume their citizenship. An answer comes from beyond the flax, softened into friendly grammar by distance. Another, thinner rumor suggests the second farm's ridge has accepted the round measure too. The star lane through the hedge opens like a seam let out by a tailor, and the lane, pleased, wears the extra width with quiet vanity. You do not reward the moon with your eyes, though it would forgive you if you did. You reward the ear for holding steady under changing cloth. You prefer the lesson to the light, because light has moods and lessons endure. Weather may lay cover over the bowl or lift it. Either way, the owls complete their books. The ledger of the field cares for entries, not for theater. Round note here, long thread there, decent pause between, no quarrel line. Your own ledger, sorted alongside, has 2 columns, enough and not needed, and the first keeps winning in a calm hand. A breeze tongues the oiled parchment in the window and leaves no stain. You move the rushlight a hand's breadth so the small moon inside does not trouble the small moon outside. Shadows take better shapes. Spoon reaches its notch. Cup stands upside down. Cloth lies smooth with the faithful stain in the usual corner. Everything is arranged to help the ear, which is the evening's honored worker. Cloud gathers again, heavier this time, and the room shrinks to a house, and the house shrinks to a hearth, and the hearth shrinks to embers. The world is not offended. It has many sizes, and keeps them all on pegs. You stand quite close to the door, so inside and outside share a hinge. From that hinge, you hear the cooper as if he worked within arm's reach, and you hear the linen as if it were a thread being drawn in your own lap. And you are not made proud by either intimacy. You are made careful. In thick dark, the senses bargain with one another. Smell buys a little more land from sight. Hearing leases a patch of ground from touch. Memory produces a handful of coins and insists on owning the dovecote corner outright, because it has paid for it over the years. You permit the transaction and remind the parties to keep their voices down. When the cloud lightens, they return their parcels without grief. Good neighbors share and then give back. A traveler would call this a poor night for walking. You call it perfect because you meant to stand still. Standing is a craft like any other. It has its tools and its rules. You hold your shoulders level as if balancing a shallow tray. You keep your jaw loose so words do not rattle the plate. You bend your knees just enough to greet the ground when it breathes. And you set your feet where the lane and the threshold agree to share you. Cloud thins. The moon returns, not as judge but as clerk, laying a pale margin along the hedge where the star lane begins. The cooper obliges by rounding his call over that margin, as though rolling a hoop along a chalk line. The linen slides once, twice, a clean line drawn with unbitten nail. Between them lives a hush that becomes heavier the more you trust it. If anyone asked later what the night taught you, you would not mention the moon at all. You would say only that the owls kept their measure under both cloth and clearing, that the house understood how to be smaller and larger without panic, and that standing still had been enough work to make the bed honest. You might add, if pressed, that clouds are good teachers for listeners, for they reward the ear each time they deny the eye. By the time the last veil lifts and the lane returns to its ordinary width, you have forgotten to wait for changes. You accept them as you accept dew and ash and the weight of a blanket, things that belong to their moments without asking to be admired. The ear keeps the middle window open, and the rest of you learns to live there. That is lesson enough for one night, generous without flourish and durable without pride. So you close nothing, you command nothing, you simply remain one careful hinge between house and hedge. A thin clink from the apple press screw declares wood still knows the grammar of effort, even at rest. A tiny rush of straw admits dreams are changing sides under a sleeping head. You let these letters drop into the ledger as cloud and moon, and you total the page not with sums, but with breath. When the next round note lands on the ridge, you answer it by being here, and when the long thread glides, you answer it by being quiet. Cloud may come again. Either way, the lesson keeps. Wind shifts. The chimney speaks another language, and you translate without opening a book. Sea wind makes the flue a humming throat. Hedge wind makes it a soft-spoken cousin. Hill wind forgets what it meant to say, and starts again and again with harmless sincerity. Tonight the grammar moves from mutter toward hum and back to mutter, as if two elders were trading chairs near the hearth and finding both to their liking. You listen without taking sides. House noise belongs to the house. Field sense belongs to the field. Both are kin, and you are an in-law who keeps good manners. Chimney talk can masquerade as bird if the ear is lazy. Yours is not. You keep two baskets in the mind's pantry and refuse to mix them. One marked house, one marked night. The first holds flue gossip, beam opinion, rushlight whisper, cat decree, plank recollection. The second holds round call, long thread, hedge sigh, drip at eaves, beetle insistence. You can reach either basket in the dark without knocking over jars. If pride visits, you give it a stool and no task. The cooper's note changes very little under any wind. It rounds the ridge as a hoop rounds a barrel, true to its circle, pleased with good staves, indifferent to small currents. The linen's long word floats truer still. A thread drawn by a hand that likes its work does not quarrel with breezes. What shifts is echo, not voice. Stone speaks a little more when sea wind carries the sound flat along thatch. Straw holds a little longer when hedge wind presses down with damp fingers. Neither misrepresents the speaker. From the doorway you can feel the air arrange itself around edges you cannot see. It pours over the apple press beam and leaves a low whirl of patience. It curls around the dovecote like a cat around a sleeping foot. It folds itself at the thorn gap and slims, and it fattens one breath at the trough corner, exactly where you expect it to. The village is full of such polite curves, learned from years of weather. When the flute chooses hum, you taste a little salt that is not your own. Out beyond the bocage, the gray water turns in its sleep and offers a spoon of brine to every roof. The taste sits on the tongue and then leaves like a neighbor who knows to keep a visit short. When the flue returns to mutter, you taste hedge and leaf mold and the faint nettle honesty that lives under good fences. These tastes are also a map, and you read them without ink. There is a superstition that says a flue can argue with owls and win if the wind favors it. You decline to test it. It is enough to note that the owls do not argue with anyone. They have clerking to do. Round, pause, round. Thread, rest, thread. The ear that has learned to sort baskets has also learned to refrain from debate. You think of the other tongues your house knows. In frost it cracks like a field, splitting stone by patience. In harvest it squeaks like a cart's relieved axle. In high summer it sighs, timber relaxing to a slower grammar. You have never taught it Latin, and it has never asked. This is a good peace between you. Wind makes small errands across the yard. It carries a scent of apple down from the press, and sets it briefly on the latch, as if to ask admission. It steals a line of ash from the hearth, and gives it back to the hedge where it will do no harm. It lifts a straw from the cat's coat, and forgets it at the threshold. You let it run these errands, and you do not keep a ledger of favors owed. When the hum grows steadier, you step half a pace into the lane, and give your breath to the moving air. The exchange pleases both parties. You receive a thinner coolness, and the world receives a slower warmth, and nobody writes it down. In that fairness, your ribs remember their proper width, and your thoughts remember their proper size. You are not in charge of anything. You are in company with it. A door somewhere disagrees with its frame and announces the fact. Wind answers with a laugh so small, only the hinge hears it. You smile because even quarrels are gentle tonight. Then the door finds its place, and the hinge keeps it, and the ledger returns to tidy columns. Back at the threshold, you let the house speak first. It says very little coal settling, wick correcting itself, boards remembering boots a lifetime ago. You reply, with nothing more than touch. A palm on beam, a finger at latch, a low nod to timber that has outlived the pride of newness. Wind pauses to watch, and then goes about its own rounds. If someone asked what the wind told you, you would not repeat words. You would show a shelf with 2 baskets, and a room where neither is dropped. You would point to a chimney that can change dialect and keep its manners. You would name a round note that did its job under both mutter and hum. And you would say that peace, like wind, is not the same twice, and can still be recognized. So you lift the latch a finger's width, and set it down again. A tiny courtesy offered to weather. You ease the rushlight wick and leave it at a frugal angle. You bank the embers so they remember you in the morning, without using up their memory. Then you stand one last quiet minute, and let the moving air comb the night smooth. Out beyond sight a long thread glides, and somewhere above a round note lands on straw, and the chimney, feeling useful, repeats neither, only makes room for both. You make room too, which is the best translation you know. It is enough now. Truly, you step back inside, and the door answers like a courteous elder, laying down its iron head without complaint. The latch finds its notch with a small, satisfied breath. You do not hurry it. You keep one hand on wood, one hand warm from the rushlight circle, and let the house remember you. Embers hold their low country of red hills and black valleys. They do not campaign, they govern by consent. The trivet, pleased to be modest, keeps a dull halo at its rim, like the last light inside a shell. You move the rushlight a hand's breadth for order rather than brightness. Shadows rearrange into useful shapes. The spoon learns its notch again. The cup turns upside down so wisdom will not tempt the cat. The folded cloth admits its faithful stain and asks for nothing grander than service. You lift the wicker salt and set it near the wall where salt prefers to be polite. The table receives these corrections with the gratitude of a field that welcomes rain exactly when it is needed. Outside continues inside through the window seam, not pushed or dragged, simply allowed as a guest who knows his chair. The cooper rounds off who, and then the pause that leaves breath for others, then who again. The barn owl draws one long thread that settles along the thatch and goes on, a careful line that never begs to be underlined. Between these, the lace of smaller sounds holds, eavesdropping a bead, moth wings tapping, the quiet arithmetic of rafters dividing weight by patience. You straighten a bench without scraping it. The leg that once squabbled has learned manners. It places itself and forgets to wobble. You set a beech peg back in the beam hole where it belongs. You pass a palm over the oiled parchment square, and the skin reads its coolness as the tongue reads a prayer without taking a bite. A barley twist of smoke climbs the flue and turns into grammar you know by ear. Mutter, not hum. Hedge wind, not sea wind. Enough for tonight. The cat considers your knee, and then allows you to borrow its warmth. It does not purr loudly. The sound is a mill wheel turning where the stream is shallow and sure. Your hand follows the spine's ordinary road and halts at the small gate between ears, where contentment keeps its post. You are allowed through, and you turn back at once, as a respectful guest does. A mouse revises a plan behind the barley sack. You hear the revision and approve. The cat hears it too, and chooses scholarship over law. Children breathe from the loft with even windless weather. A straw rustle proves a dream has rolled from one side to the other and settled. You stand at the foot of the ladder, and you do not climb. You have already counted everything that wishes to be counted. Numbers would only make more numbers. Instead, you match the pauses between the cooper's rounds to the tiny rests that live between the hearts of sleepers. The match holds. That is accounting enough. You adjust the ash with the flat of the rake, not for heat, but for company. Coals lean together and accept the new shape without complaint. A black crust gives up and becomes a blush again. The blush breathes and then remembers thrift. You lay a stick no bigger than your thumb across the nearest hill and teach it the quiet way to burn. It learns quickly because some lessons enjoy being learned. The window seam cools your wrist. You rest there and let the lane pass through you like water, through a woven basket that keeps what it needs by letting everything else go. Dovecote shadow holds its square like a patient book open to the correct page. The press beam hums old sweetness into the lintel. A neighbor's door tries one last opinion and is persuaded by its beam. A dog, trying on philosophy, sets it down again before the thought becomes a bark. You wipe the knife on the inside fold of the cloth where it has always been wiped. The edge does not boast. It remembers onion and the day's small cheese and keeps its mouth closed about both. You slip the knife into its slot as you would tuck a child back under a blanket done once, done right, then left alone. The spoon keeps counsel with the bowl. The bowl remembers a crack like a crescent moon and shows no pride in holding together. Modesty is a craft, and the room practices it well. You listen again to the seam of world and house, the clean stitch that joins them without puckering. Owls draw straight lines outdoors, and indoors the cat loops a smaller script across brick and settles. Each script is honest. Each page is turned at the proper time. A moth discovers the limit of its devotion to flame and returns to safe air. You lean your shoulder against the jamb and feel the wood cool your sleeve. Stone is steady underfoot. Iron keeps its duty. Cloth keeps its folded speech. You do nothing. And because you do nothing thoroughly, the house finishes its evening work. Heat seats itself lower. Smell folds into gentler layers. Smoke under apple, wool under ash, wood under wool. You feel the presence of bread you are not eating, of water you will not fetch until dawn, of chores you will not rehearse because rehearsal steals rest. The rushlight makes a small sound like a reed remembering river. You trim the wick a grain, and the flame agrees to be sufficient. When at last you sit, the bench accepts you, as a field accepts a shadow. You fold your hands, not in piety, but in tidiness, and let your back learn the press beam again. Outside, a round call lands on the ridge. Inside, stillness stretches from latch to hearth. You agree to be held. Spindle turns slow as a tide, and your hands rehearse what they know without thinking. Pull, twist, wind, rest, breathe, listen. The distaff has been patient all evening, a slender tree bearing tame weather, and now the wool slips off it like mist off hedges. You do not hurry the thread. Haste is for markets and quarrels. The rushlight keeps its small moon at a thrifty tilt, enough to find the shadowed notch on the spindle's whorl, not enough to flatter anyone's pride. You like it that way. Soft light belongs to steady work, and steady work belongs to soft light. Each pinch is a field learned by fingers. The staple's length, the lanolin's calm, the little rasp where a burr outlived shearing. Your thumb settles such matters with no speech, and your forefinger agrees. Twist gathers, travels, and lays along the forming line, obedient as any road that keeps to its valley. When the twist grows vain, you slacken. When it grows thin, you ease. When it remembers modesty, you praise it by doing nothing at all. Behind the ear, owls inventory their larger quiet in patterns that help your hands remember small quiet. Spinning teaches hearing to be honest. If your fingers rush, the fiber snags. If your mind gallops, the the twist kinks. If your pride shows, the thread overcorrects and becomes a sermon no one asked for. So you keep company with steadiness. You let the spindle have the slow fall it wants. You give the fiber only as much as it deserves. You stand your breath in the doorway of your chest and ask it to speak softly. In that courteous arrangement, the world answers with the right voices. The eaves drip one patient bead. The cooper lays a round note on the ridge. The barn owl draws one long, linen line and does not tug. You wind the new length onto the cop, snug but not strangled, and the spindle hums a syllable under its breath. That hum matches the drawn line more than the round call. You notice it, approve of it, and then forget the approval so the work may keep its calm. Hands make a little weather. Palms warm the twist. Knuckles cool it. The oil in wool greets the oil in skin, and the two agree to be reasonable neighbors till the job is done. You pass the thread through fingers as through a gentle gate, and keep the gate unimportant. You think of fields dressed for winter, hedges trimmed low, ditches cleared with decent thrift, gates mended without brag. Spinning feels like that, preparing edges so nothing catches where it should not, making a path for tomorrow's hands. You remember the sheep that gave this wool, a shy, stubborn creature that believed grass was a better sermon than bells. Its fleece had the clean peat smell you wish all things wore. Wash, card, tease. And now this soft geometry between finger and thumb is the last of that long patience becoming something useful. The spindle's weight teaches gravity how to behave. It drops, it turns. It asks the fiber to become itself in an orderly way. And the fiber obeys because obedience is comfortable when it is not proud. You give it your attention the way you give water to a pot on the hearth. Steady, modest, never scolding. When the twist ripens, you park the spindle against your knee. Wind the bounty with motions small as courtesy, and set it free again. Each release is a tiny letting go that does not resemble loss. It resembles trust. Owls approve of this discipline. They keep their own tempo, and you keep yours, and no one tells the other to hurry. The round measure steadies your fingers when a slub proposes mischief. The long line smooths your jaw when thought tries to gnaw at rope that can wait until daylight. If the thin needle pricks at the orchard, inquisitive and sure it is important, you congratulate its courage and then allow it to retire with dignity. Your work never rises to meet that pen. Your work declines to be a contest. Somewhere under the loft ladder, a board remembers a boot and creaks once out of habit. You answer the board with a small smile and give it nothing further to carry. Children breathe on the far side of the ceiling like tide that forgot to argue. The Rushlight gutters remembers thrift and corrects itself. You trim a whisper from the wick with the nail of your thumb and watch the circle of light learn moderation again. Moderate things belong together. Well-banked coals, well-twisted thread, well-measured pauses. You wet a finger and smooth a timid hair back into the thread where it belongs. Not a scold, only a nudge. The cop fattens and shows its quiet helical pride work made visible, not show. You run a palm across your knee to bargain a way that tickle the fibers left, and your skin agrees to bear the small tax. The smell of apple from the press beam lingers like a sentence that ended kindly and did not need a flourish. You hear the long line stretch once over the paddock, and then a second time, and in the interval your breath widens and settles, like cloth laid without wrinkles. When you pause, the pause is a tool. You let the spindle hang motionless. You let the fiber rest. You let the round call land on the ridge and dissolve into straw without insisting on a meaning. Work puts itself away inside your hands the same way embers put themselves away inside ash. Not gone, simply quieter and more thoroughly itself. The ear, settled by repetition and clean intent, accepts this reduced world as sufficient and declares the lesson memorized. You hang the spindle from a peg by the hearth and stroke the cop once, as a neighbor might pat a horse after a common journey. The thread will see more work before it is cloth, that is, tomorrow's politeness. Tonight, it has been enough to turn fleece into a line the owls can hear without annoyance. You take the stool with you, as if you were taking a well-behaved child from a friendly visit. The house nods. The lane continues, and you stand with both in your pocket like two small coins that buy a clear path to sleep. You move very softly now because softness is contagious, and the house has already caught it. Children breathe in the loft like a small sea that forgot to raise waves. You know each breath the way a shepherd knows each sheep, by ankle and temper. The littlest turns once, straw giving a dry whisper that means the dream has found the cooler side and is satisfied. You do not step on the board that loves speeches. You step around it as if placing a clay bowl on a shelf that has earned respect, and the board accepts the compliment by being silent. You lay a finger on the ladder's upright and feel the faint tremor of sleeping weight above. Not worry, only proof that rest is in progress and intends to continue. A moth changes its mind near the rushlight and sets down impatience like a toy, newly content to circle nothing at all. The cat, having appointed itself keeper of stillness, redraws its tail around the warmest brick and permits the room to continue. You pass by all this as moonlight passes by a bowl, touching without stirring, seeing without insisting. Your hands remember how to be pockets. Your jaw remembers how to unhook its effort and rest. The floor holds stories inside its grain, but tonight it refuses to tell them, which is a mercy timber learns from winter. You step where the knots are honest, and the seams do not ask to be noticed, and nothing complains under your heel. The window seam lends a thread of night to your wrist, cool as a spoon that knows how to wait. Through that narrow grammar the field continues in even clauses. Round call, pause, round, linen drawn and set, crickets stitching the margin so sentences do not fall off the page. You tend the hearth with the quiet authority of someone who asks little and receives more. Ash keeps its gray village over the red, roofs thatched against waste, every lane between mounds neat and sensible. You lift a small crust with the back of the rake and let the blush beneath show its polite face, then lay it back to teach it patience. A pinch of ash buys a slower burn, and the coals agree, as reasonably as elders, at a fair price. You lay a stick no larger than duty across 2 hills, a bridge that knows it is only a bridge, and the flame thanks you without making a speech. In the loft, a sigh travels from one straw ridge to another like a traveler who mistook the door and found the right one without waking anyone. You listen for the little cough that sometimes follows rain-fresh evenings and hear none. The chest is clear, the nose at ease. You listen for a foot that loves to wander even in sleep and hear only obedience. Steady as a clock you do not own and do not want. You let your ears keep their book with neat margins and leave the entries unadorned. Names are not necessary here. The breathing is the signature. You sit on the bench that remembers other nights and does not confuse them with this one. The bench has learned the art of not arguing and keeps its creak for daylight when talk is cheaper. Your palms rest on your knees, and your knees become posts, and posts become patience. The rushlight leans. You trim it with a thumbnail. It remembers its calling and grows modest again. Modesty suits everything in this room, even the good smell of apple from the press beam, which behaves like a guest who brings bread and then helps wash the bowl. You match your breath to the smallest interval the night provides, the hush between a child's inhale and the first scant grain of the exhale, the space where a chest thinks of other matters and remembers air just in time. Into that pocket, you set your own air like a coin you do not spend, holding it until the pocket warms around it. When the round call touches the ridge, the pocket widens. When the long line passes over the byre, the pocket goes on being itself. When the drip at the eaves lets go, the pocket receives that bead without fuss. Habit offers to take over, and you let it. Because habit is a road you laid earlier with honest stones, and it carries you home without asking for praise. You rise and step to the basket for a cloth, not because a spill requires it, but because order is a good pillow. You fold the cloth into a square with edges, even enough to please a cooper's eye, and set it where cloth has always waited out the dark. The gesture is the prayer, the cloth is the amen. Nothing more is needed from either of you. A neighbor's hinge speaks once far down the lane, and your house decides not to answer. You are grateful for a building that refuses to gossip. The flue keeps to hedgewind grammar. The oiled parchment keeps its pale, well-behaved window, and the wooden cup stands upside down so no remnant may tempt the cat into learning a new vice. The cat, who has mastered the best ones, accepts the limit with royal indifference, and returns to scholarship by the ash door. You remember a winter when boards shouted and beds bit, when every breath had to be sharpened to cut frost into pieces small enough to swallow. This is not that winter. This is a night that gives before it is asked, and you teach your shoulders to believe it. They lower like shutters at curfew, and the latch seems to sit more comfortably on its iron hooks, as if your bones were teaching the beam how to rest. If any thought insists on entering, you make it sit with its hands folded, and promise silence until morning. Enough. Eaves drip a measured village heartbeat, the last of yesterday taking its proper path to ground. Each bead lets go like a small decision already made. You stand at the window seam, where night lends your wrist a cool thread. You let the drops count gently upon the threshold stone. Between those beads, the round call rides the thatch who, then the kind pause. Who again, an equal pause, while the long linen note draws low over the byre and refuses to hurry for anyone's sake. The rushlight leans toward ambition. You trim the tallow's lip with a nail and persuade the wick to behave. Not proud, not sleepy, just a steady almond no bigger than it needs to be. Light walks over bowl, spoon, folded cloth, and leaves them unastonished. Ash breathes in the grate, settling into little red countries that govern by consent. The cat, employed as keeper of stillness, shifts one paw and then decides that stillness is doing fine without extra management. Outside, hedges wear their damp like shawls saved for visiting. Nettles keep their breath tidy. The trough keeps a modest moon, and the ruts borrow stars and give them back in broken pieces. The dovecote square is a deeper dark, where small feathers keep the idea of grain alive until morning. Nothing asks your eyes to travel farther than your listening already has. Drip, and a polite gap. Who, and a polite gap. Linen, and the longer space that follows a good line when no one feels obliged to clap. You take that spacing into your bones the way wool takes dye. Slow, accepting, altered without effort. Breath goes out like a gift set on a palm. Breath comes in like a gift received with thanks. Thoughts try to fetch a basket of chores down from the shelf. The basket, being reasonable, suggests tomorrow and climbs back again without your help. You level the coals with the rake's flat back, not to rouse them, only to improve their company. A thin stick makes a quiet bridge between red hills and promises to hold both banks in talk until dawn. Ash drifts like very light snow that knows how to listen. Somewhere beyond the flax, the cousin Cooper answers, rounded by distance into a rumor that smiles. A cow chooses lying down and turns the thought into practice. Your fingers rest upon the latch and learn its cool as if greeting an old family word. The braid keeps. Drip, who thread. You tuck your shoulders lower, as if the night had handed you a shawl and you wish to wear it correctly. Smoke, apple, clean wool, the perfumes of ordinary peace take their seats. You do nothing in a way that makes room for everything else to continue. The house, content with this policy, holds you like a bench holds a shadow, kindly, without comment, exactly as long as needed, and no longer. A last call stitches fields together, courteous as thread to cloth. You stand where door and lane share a hinge, and let the seam pass through you. It comes from farther, then nearer, then far again. A needle going through wool you cannot see, and do not need to. The seam lies true, because no one tugs. Its pull runs under hedge and wall and roof, drawing edges to cousinship, without asking them to dress alike. You do not measure, you allow. Your breath finds the distance between notes, and sits there like a small, obedient stool, waiting to be useful. You answer with the only craft that fits. You put away what is left to put away. The cup, upside down, vows to keep its last sweetness to itself. The spoon admits its notch, and takes its berth like a boat in a patient harbor. The folded cloth shows its faithful stain, as a veteran shows a scar, without boasting and without shame. You touch the spindle, already inclined to sleep, and praise it with a turn not required and therefore perfect. The bench shifts a thumb's width and decides to approve your tidiness. The room agrees without applause. At the hearth, you bank the embers into a hill with soft shoulders. Each small red valley accepts a drift of ash, the way a lamb accepts a hand on its neck. Not scolded, simply reminded. A stick no thicker than promised bridges two coals, and calls them neighbors until morning. Iron answers with one satisfied breath, the smith's last word spoken without need to be heard. Heat lowers itself politely, and agrees to keep watch at half height. Smoke chooses modest paths, and writes nothing that needs reading. The seam moves again, Farther this time, and you feel the village answer by settling its own bones. A door across the lane decides to be wood and not opinion. A hinge thinks better of a remark. A dog, busy with study since dusk, closes the book and keeps the lesson. Over the byre, the long linen word is drawn and set, with the self-respect of craft that will not be hurried by applause. You do not clap. The knight prefers competence to ceremony and keeps both hands free. You look toward the oiled parchment and find the moon's thin margin sitting there like a favor tucked under a plate. It is enough. The pane gives you a coin of light to buy your last tasks with, and you pay without haggling. You walk the line from latch to hearth, slow as a farmer counting sacks, not to learn numbers but to be fair to each. Latch, beam, peg, stool, rake, pot, hook, trivet, cup, spoon, cloth, spindle. The list ends of itself when nothing is missing, and you are satisfied. Outside, sound continues its ledger, and you keep a matching copy within. Round, pause, round, thread, rest, thread. No quarrel line appears. The page stays clean. You sign with breath, and the room co-signs with stillness. The cat, clerk of small laws, inspects the ash door, writes one whisker mark on the air, and returns to keep scholarship on the warm brick. Even the mouse, reading the same minutes, declines to make a motion. Agreement pleases the hour and makes the rafters feel younger. The last call does not know it is the last, which is why it is good. It does not lean on meaning or ask to be remembered. It goes about its work, governing hedges and ruts and rafters, then sets down its pen and lets the paper dry. You let your eyes forget to be eyes and become lids. You let your shoulders abandon their old duty of being walls. You let your hands practice emptiness and succeed. The seam, feeling no resistance anywhere, draws through everything without snag or complaint. You stand still so the hem may lie flat. Behind your ribs, a quiet tailor works in silhouettes, fitting breath to pauses, trimming waste thoughts, basting the edges of sense so sleep can take them in later without remeasure. He uses pins of patience and thread of warmth. Everything that can be tried on is tried on, and everything that can be put aside is put aside. The garment is not for display. It is the plain wool of rest, cut to the village and to your bones and to this hour. From the meadow beyond the flax a cousin voice answers, softened by distance into kindness. From the ridge above your own door the cooper rounds what needs rounding. Between them, a length of dark fabric is carried hand to hand until it covers the yard. You accept the cover and are not smaller for accepting. Cover does not reduce, it completes. You go to the bed because the path is made, not because you are chaste. Straw receives you with dry weather and keeps its rustle friendly and brief. You leave nothing to chance. You leave everything to custom. The beam has its wedge. The wedge has its virtue. The latch knows the palm that will lift it in the morning. The cup waits upside down. The rake leans with teeth inward, as decent tools do. The rushlight bows to its small end. The coals keep their republic under ash. The cat owns a square of brick that belongs to all cats. The house keeps your shape the way a glove keeps a hand's good opinion. You have the cloth now. Now the seam truly tugs, then rests, then shortens, as the bird goes outward to the farther hedge. Soon it will be only a rumor over the field. Then only the stitch already made. Then only the cloth itself. You do not strain after it. Cloth is what you wanted, not thread. Thread was the courtesy by which cloth became possible. You turn once so the fold lies right, and the straw agrees without comment for you tonight. You share notes in low humor with the one who shares your bed, a conversation measured in wool and breath rather than wit. Not much is said. That is the joke, and the joke is kind. Cooper on the ridge, you offer, and the words take up no more room than a folded hand. Linen over the byre comes back, steady as an old lane that declines to learn new corners. The two of you have traded these plain reports for years, like reciting prices at a market where nothing is bought and everything is kept for comfort. The cat pretends not to listen, which is its way of listening very hard. Blankets shift to admit these remarks and then forget them. Straw gives its crisp assent and returns to modest quiet. You both wait a moment longer, to be certain the ledger closes without a quarrel line. It does. The neighbor's hinge speaks once, improved from earlier by the ointment of patience. The dog, grown scholarly, keeps his opinion in a shut book. Your last remark is a yawn that means, in the local tongue, we are not needed, and that is pleasant. The room accepts the verdict and arranges itself around your decision to be horizontal. Beams and bricks relax their shoulders, the way people do when a meeting ends early and nobody objects. You lay your palm upon the blanket and feel the small wind of sleep moving beneath it like tide under a pier. Cloth remembers the day's work, a turn at the press beam, a hand at the latch, the counting of pegs along the ridge, and then releases each memory as if it were a bead, slipped off a string and returned to its box. Beside you, the slow rise and fall of another chest becomes a bellows for patience. This sound has no preaching in it. It is simply the body keeping house with breath, and you love it for that stubborn plainness. If a sermon is needed, let it be this: in, out, and neither in debt. Outside, the owls continue their careful bureaucracy without requiring your signature. A round call lands, pauses, and lands again, arranging itself along the roofline like pewter buttons on a simple coat. The long thread crosses the yard and ties hedge to paddock, with a knot so neat it disappears. Between, a hush widens, the sort of space in which thought forgets the habit of standing up straight. You and yours breathe that space as if it were warm milk. You drink without hurry, and the cup never empties. The night sees to the refilling and submits no bill. A whisper of talk returns, not for news, but for tidiness. You name the 3 cupboards of sound the dark has left open: Cooper, linen, needle. Your companion adds 2 more that live indoors: Rushlight and cat. The cat dignifies this mention by turning once upon the brick and settling its decree with a thump polite enough to pass for silence. The Rushlight, flattered beyond its station, gutters, remembers thrift, and corrects itself to the proper almond. You both smile with your mouths closed so the room does not have to rearrange for teeth. There is the question you always ask at this time, a ritual as modest as rinsing a cup. Tomorrow, you say, and leave room around the word for whatever the world decides. Garden first, comes the answer. If the soil approves, press after. The plan is smaller than pride and larger than worry. It fits in the palm like a useful pebble. You set it on the table of the mind and slide it to the far edge, where morning will find it without searching, and then you leave it there. Plans like that prefer not to be fussed over. They last longer when ignored. Wind revises its grammar, and the chimney answers in a new dialect. You both hear it and make no comment. Houses are allowed changes of mind if they keep their manners. In the seam of quiet that follows, you trade the last inventory. Latch settled, beam wedged true, cup upside down, cloth folded even, spindle resting, embers banked, cat and children accounted for, window cured of drafts by the old trick of a wedge no larger than a thumb. These are not boasts. These are receipts. The hour likes a simple audit, and you pass it without ink. You turn in the straw until your shoulder finds last night's hollow. Your companion finds the cousin hollow beside it. 2 small valleys good for drifting. The blankets take your weight and pretend to be deeper than they are. You smile barely at the old superstition that an owl may borrow a coat and walk like a person. If any spirit wants a coat tonight, let it inherit this blanket's corner and learn the virtue of staying still. The thought finishes itself and lies down like a well-behaved dog beneath the bench of your mind. The owls keep counting what must be counted, which is not your thoughts, not your faults, not your cleverness or your lack. They count hedges and mice and the distance between calls. Their ledger teaches you how to keep yours. You close the book of the day without drama. No flourishes, no red ink. A single line reads, "Enough done." You place 2 fingers on your companion's wrist and feel the slow river there. It answers with the calm of a horse that knows it's stable, and in that river your own pulse chooses a slower ford. When the next round note lands, you answer it with nothing more than being here. When the next long glide passes, you answer it with nothing more than not speaking. The bed learns your shape as a field learns weather by morning, without resentment and without surprise. The cat breathes in the keyhole of sleep and leaves it unlocked for you. The rushlight shortens bravely and refuses to trouble anyone with smoke. The window seam grows cooler, and you are glad of it. Your face prefers the small honesty of that air to the grand persuasion of warmth. You think of the word keep, how it serves both house and heart. Keep the latch, keep the hush, keep each other, keep watch without staring. Keep faith with the work that is patient and the rest that is earned. The word is plain and durable. You pass it between you the way you pass bread, without ceremony and with full attention. Then you let the word go, because words ask to be put away at this hour, and kept words are often the ones the room remembers for you. Sleep comes in as if it had always lived here, and only stepped out to fetch water. It finds its old chair, touches the beam with 2 fingers, nods to the cat, and sits. Your companion has already agreed to its terms. You sign your name with a last easy breath and hand the pen back. Outside, the owls keep their quiet circuits. Inside, the room keeps yours. Nothing is missing. Nothing is late. The notes are shared. The ledger is closed. The lamp is small. The bed is large enough. And the world for this kindly while requires no answer from you except the steady, even grammar of sleep. Blankets rise. Straw answers with quiet. And the bed behaves like a field in a kind season, dry, obedient, willing to keep your shape without filing a complaint. The mattress rustles once to prove it is alive and then chooses the steady hush that pleases bones. You lower yourself into the hollow you made yesterday, and the hollow remembers you like a friend who never moved away. Heat from the banked coals makes a small weather under the covers, mild as an old steward who finally learned to whisper. One ear stays open because habit is courteous, not suspicious. Through the window seam, the round call beads the roof line. Who? Pause. Who? The long linen pass follows, tying yard to paddock with a not too neat to brag. You match your breath to those spaces, not to own them but to thank them. In goes the air, as if it had folded hands. Out it goes, as if it had finished a line in good script and set down its quill. The blanket has its own quiet grammar. Wool agrees to be hill and valley, weight and mercy. Your knees discover a valley and settle like travelers who found the right inn at last. Your shoulder leans against a ridge and writes a note to the straw, which replies with friendly crispness, heard, understood, no further questions. A thread tickles, you ignore it, and the thread, feeling unimportant, behaves. You are generous enough to let small victories belong to the bedding. Above, the loft holds its sleeping weather light winds, no storms. A child sighs once and sails on. The board that enjoys speeches decides to be private tonight. The cat keeps scholarship on the warm brick, occasionally turning a page no one else can see. You consider the day you set aside and discover it has stayed where you left it, folded and put away without sneaking back to tug your sleeve. Proper of it. The house has shrunk to the parts that do not ask for thought. Latch settled, beam wedged, pegs content, trivet patient, pot retired from politics. The rushlight shortens with modest courage. Ash hides red villages that govern themselves. You allow the brain to stop narrating furniture and let the furniture remember itself. Outside, hedges wear their damp shawls with the dignity of elders at a small feast. The trough keeps a modest moon and refuses to boast. Ruts keep crumbs of stars and do not pretend they bake them. The owls keep counting the only things worth counting at this hour. Distances, pauses, mice careless enough to give lessons. You keep nothing, and therefore everything stays. You test the pillow with a cheek, as a merchant tests cloth, and approve the weave. Straw beneath behaves like chaff that decided to be useful. The cloth above smells faintly of smoke, nettle soap, and the clean animal truth of wool. Nothing here is trying to be better than it is. You let that honesty do the hard part of resting for you. Your jaw unhooks from its proud duty. The tongue hangs its apron. The eyes tidy their tools and close the shop. A draft walks over your temple, thin as a finger drawn through flour. It reminds you that the night is shared property, house, hedge, roof, field, sea, and that your license to lie warm is renewed each dusk by simple labor and decent listening. You accept the license and decline to frame it. Good paper deserves to remain uncreased. Who, says the ridge, then patient silence. Who, again, then the linen glide that never asks applause. Between these, crickets mend their seam, one bright stitch after another, keeping the edge of sleep from curling. You do not thank them. You simply use their work as if you had always paid for it. The bed, flattered to be useful, remembers to be softer at the hip and firmer at the heel. And you remember to stop being a collection of opinions. If a thought knocks, you let it stand in the doorway until it forgets why it came. If a memory tries to boast, you show it the stool by the wall where old stories sit and cool. If a plan raises its hand, you give it tomorrow and see it to the door. The room likes this housekeeping of the mind. It stretches a palm over your chest and flattens the last wrinkle from the day. Your breathing becomes a villager that knows the lanes past the dovecote shadow, along the press beam's patient smell, over the byre where the long voice travels, into the orchard gap where the needle almost speaks, and then thinks better. It walks this circuit without lantern, nodding to the hedges, lifting its cap to the moon when the moon behaves, and returning home by rule of habit and the blessing of feet. Straw tells a very old joke to your shoulder, something about a cart that forgot its axle and still arrived, then quits well ahead. You smile without moving. The blanket hears and pretends not to. The pillow makes room for your cheekbone, as if paid to do so. The seam of the window grows cooler. Your face, pleased to belong to weather again, learns the kindness of that small air. A moth touches cloth near your ear like a priest who knows you already confessed. You forgive it for being a moth, and it forgives you for being awake this much. The cat makes a tiny decision and cancels it. The children turn toward deeper shade. The embers choose to remember rather than perform. The world publicly declines drama and privately excels at order. You let the village keep itself. Parish bell, far off, may tell its hours later. You grant it leave to do so without consulting you. Hedge and lane and thatch can attend their reputations, while you tend the one duty that belongs to you, lying down properly. You do this with a seriousness that borders on mockery, and then tips back into good sense. You keep still and let sleep choose you, without any ceremony tonight. Sleep arrives, while the owls keep watch, not as a trumpet, but as a clerk, with keys who knows each door by feel. It does not announce itself. It moves through the house, closing what must be closed and leaving open what needs air. You do not help. You've already done your share, by lying still, by letting breath perform its useful arithmetic, by believing the bed when it says it has remembered your shape. The blanket confirms this testimony. The straw, a seasoned witness, offers one quiet rustle. That means it will bear you without complaint, and then keeps its oath. Heat from banked coals builds a small weather under the cover and forgets ambition. Your knees discover the valley prepared for them. Your shoulder finds the place it petitioned for earlier and is granted it by the cord of wool. Hands loosen, jaw loosens, tongue folds its apron, eyes give their last report to darkness, the only authority that never needs ink. Ears keep a watch so mild it barely counts as work. Through the seam, the round bead lands once more, then the modest silence, then the bead again. The bead is smaller now because you are farther away, which is to say deeper in. Outside, the ridge speaks its careful syllable, and then its equal rest. The long linen word glides along the byre and disappears by design. Hedges keep their damp shawls and their opinions. The trough holds its modest moon. The ruts divide a few crushed stars and do not argue about the portions. Inside, the rushlight resigns its small throne grain by grain and bows without drama. Ash folds over the red republic. The cat needs paperwork on the warm brick, signs with a whisker, and goes to administrative sleep. Boards remember to be boards. Iron remembers to be iron. Nothing in the room asks you to be exceptional. You agree with this policy. Agreement is the final craft of the evening. You loosen your hands and find that your hands loosen you. The spine measures itself against the straw and decides that both can be modest at once. Breath travels the parish it knows. Oiled parchment square, apple press beam, dovecote shadow, thatch ridge, orchard gap, byre eaves, loft step, banked fire. It greets each in order and asks nothing. The parish greets it back with the same thrift. Even the board that loves to be interesting declines to speak. Perhaps it has heard itself at last and decided to be a better neighbor. The house appreciates this restraint and grows lighter by the weight of one unspoken story. A faint salt comes from beyond the bocage, clean as a pail that has done its mourning in some future hour and return to brag politely. You do not follow it. You have retired from the day's club and paid your modest dues. Tomorrow will open its door without asking for a password. The plan sits where you left it, a pebble on the mind's table, and you do not touch it. Pebbles are improved by being left alone. They teach patience to the pockets that keep them. The world can manage itself while you manage this one task of stillness. No oath is required. No cleverness is solicited. Gravity writes its plain sentence, and you sign your name with a slow breath. Sleep, meanwhile, adjusts its keys and closes a last small door behind memory. Not locked, only put to. The latch will lift again at dawn when the bell counts its decent beads over the village. For now, the room is a good ledger, with all columns balanced. Debts have gone to bed. Credits have hung up their coats. The page is not blank, but it is finished. Your name appears once, in tidy script, beside the sum called enough. The owls keep their offices. The cooper rounds a note and sets it where it belongs. The linen clerk draws a line and files it under proper. Somewhere the needle pricks once with tidy conscience and retires. You are no part of their payroll, and yet your breathing matches their hours. Their wages are mice. Yours is rest. All parties consider the exchange suitable. No one drafts a new charter tonight. The old rules work. Keep the gaps generous. Treat roofs kindly. Remember hedges are elders. And leave haste at the door. Your bones begin that pleasant forgetting of edges. Elbow becomes hill rather than hinge. Heel becomes a stone that chose to be warm. Shoulder becomes a small gate left standing open because no one in this parish steals. The pillow, a competent clerk itself, records these changes and files them under comfort. If a dream comes, it walks in like a neighbor with bread, sets the loaf on the table, and does not expect a story in return. It is enough to be bread. You think, briefly and almost without words, of the cottage from the lane. Cob walls, thin moon, the latch that knows your palm, the beam that remembers weight and forgives it, the press with apple stored inside its frown. You think of the path to the well, the way the bucket kisses the lip, the way water says its single cold sentence, and is right. Then thought becomes merely texture, as cloth made of sense becomes cloth made of thread. The mind, relieved of vocabulary, adopts the local dialect of quiet. Sentences soften into wool, meaning relaxes its belt and agrees to be comfortable. Beyond the flax, a cousin voice gives a final courteous call. The ridge above offers its proper answer. Between them stretches a strip of night as even as linen laid for drying, and on that strip your breath lies down. You are not master of anything here, and this is what makes you the most welcome guest. You close the contract with a yawn so small it never thinks to turn into speech. Your last officious act is to draw 1 foot deeper under the blanket.